Won't you give a big hand for errors, applause for mistakes? Without them we wouldn't be here. Let's hear it for inexactitude, for imprecision, bravo. For fudging it, hip hip, 3 cheers. DNA of twisted double helix fame is an expert at that self-replication game. But once in a million times it goes wrong, and thanks to that we're singing this song. Won't you give a big hand for errors, applause for mistakes? Without them we wouldn't be here. Let's hear it for inexactitude, for imprecision, bravo. For fudging it, hip hip, 3 cheers. If that new mutation hits an egg or seed, which managed to combine together and then lead to one new fungus, plant or beast, that baby will be a little different at least. That mutation will probably reduce our new pal's ability to reproduce. But every now and then a mutation arrives, gives you a better chance of making more lives. For imprecision, bravo. For fudging it, hip hip, 3 cheers. When the kids inherit that mutated gene, they're fitter than they otherwise might have been. To have more kids themselves and pass it on, and so it spreads through the population. Let's award the first prize for cock-ups, the second for slips. Without them we're nothing but slimy algae. Put your hands together for things that go wrong. Take off your hats to serendipity. Won't you give a big hand for errors, applause for mistakes? Without them we wouldn't be here. Let's hear it for inexactitude, for imprecision, bravo. For
his campaign is, as I think. Thanks. So we'll do this all over again. You ready, guys?
Yep. Sure.
Welcome to Cambridge Community Television.
We should call this show
CCTV.
Graybeards.
Exactly. Yeah, it's true. This is the Gray Beard, and it's all here in reference to Bernie Sanders. We have 2 guests, illustrious guests in our studio today, Jay and Paul. Thanks for coming. It's great having both of you here. And as Paul stated, it's a graybeard discussion about a candidate, Bernie Sanders, and about the reality of his campaign. There's going to be a lot that can be said about Bernie Sanders, and we are going to try to say it all. This is what we look like from the top. And as you can see, this is on Mass Avenue, the sidewalk to Mass Avenue, right in front of our studios. And this is a more realistic picture of who we are and what we'll be talking about. Paul, I think you had a very clear statement about why Bernie Sanders is in this campaign and why his campaign is so electrifying.
Well, I was asked, we were talking about why Bernie was the one to sort of point out everything that's been going on for the last 20 years, 25 years. And I likened it to a chicken that's being cooked in a pot. Starts out, it's cold, and then slowly but surely the water heats up, and then at some point the chicken realizes that he's not in a particularly good place. This is a story about cooking frogs, but I changed it over to chicken.
Chicken in every pot is the thing.
Yeah, somebody has to jump out of the pot and say, look what's happening here. We're all getting cooked beyond our ability to put up with it. And so the system has been slowly really sort of closing in on the middle class and on the poor and on anybody that didn't have the money to send a lobbyist to Congress. So ultimately, we've been slow cooked for years, and now suddenly we're feeling the pain.
Why do you think Sanders is the first politician to actually come out and say this, the first establishment politician?
I don't think he's saying anything he hasn't said for a while. I just think that the receptors are kind of in place now. I think my daughter went through college, and we discovered by the time we discovered how much she owed, she was $250,000 in debt.
Wow. Oh my God.
Yeah. And let me tell you, your receptivity to a message about how college debt can kill students, I mean, basically just absolutely wear them down, becomes a lot more meaningful when you've had one of your own children go through that. And she's still, fortunately, Obama's healthcare law had a segment that allowed people like my daughter to, once they got to work for a nonprofit, to have, in 10 years they can work through the debt, and they can also, at this point, they're on a program so they're only paying a certain percentage, and that makes a tremendous difference. She had to basically live to pay her debt before, and now she can live a life. So I think we're all just starting to feel it. There's only so much you can take out of the pockets of the middle class before at some point they can't afford to go to the movies, or they can't afford to buy a car or send their kids to camp. I think it all just catches up with you.
Jay, you have children too, don't you?
Yeah, I have 2 teenagers, and we're thinking about college for them. And I was just thinking about the degree to which the Sanders candidacy is the manifestation of what we saw in the Occupy Wall Street movement, and how there's the placards that you see people holding up about their hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of student debt and their sort of bad entry-level jobs, or their inability to get jobs, and how Sanders speaks to these people in a way that the traditional Democratic candidates just haven't and aren't. And so it's in hindsight, it seems like Sanders or someone like him is inevitable, right? But when you first start hearing it, it's just it's astonishing that that he's on television, that this message is even available.
Your point about Occupy is really very, very pertinent. I think in some ways the Occupy movement was kind of like John the Baptist preceding Jesus.
Yeah.
Somebody had to be out there getting everything kind of soil turned over for the seeds.
And in the same way, and the sort of strange independent left-right overlap that sort of you saw in the beginning of the Tea Party before it was completely co-opted by big money, that there was this sense of in which the needs of the investing class were being represented by our government, but the needs of working class and middle class people weren't, and so there was that sort of overlap in the Occupy movement between sort of a progressive utopianism and libertarian disquiet with oligarchy, with big money, and we see the same thing in the Sanders appeal to some independent voters. You know, where you see some of the people who are Bernie or bust, or some of the people who just are not interested in a traditional Democratic candidate, who are wild for Bernie Sanders.
Well, the traditional Democratic candidate has already gone so far to the center that, you know, essentially they could be right wing for all anybody cares. And that was kind of the Clinton legacy. Clinton became a centrist and managed to work with these Republicans and basically left the left wing behind. And then Elizabeth Warren and Bernie started to say, well, wait, this is not working for most of the country.
Yeah.
So it's just time. It's time for this thing to happen. If it doesn't happen this year with Bernie, it will happen with somebody else, probably somebody a little younger, and maybe Warren or somebody like that.
Yeah, I worked on the Warren campaign, and it was exciting. It was the first time in my political life in which I felt like I wasn't sort of, you know, working for the lesser of two evils. It was this thing where it was like, oh my God, this person I actually agree with a lot of what she's saying. And watching that campaign, watching that room fill up with people volunteering, you know, you start out in a room with a lot of telephones and there's no one there. And you're calling people up and you're filling that room up. And to see it go from just a few people and some lists, you know, on paper, and then all of a sudden you've got this room just vibrating with energy of people calling people, and suddenly you realize, oh, this is more important than money. The fact that I can call someone and they'll listen to me, and then you'd call people and they wanted to talk to you and they wanted to hear this message, and you could see how like no amount of money in the world could necessarily elect someone that. When you call someone and they just didn't want to hear you. So you see that with Jeb Bush. We see $150 million and no one cared.
Right.
So it was a great practice for Bernie.
Jeb Bush was like a Yugo. A car that nobody would ever in their right mind buy. You know, sitting on the lot, it may have a nice shine to it, but God, if you open that door and then close it, it's not going to thunk.
Yeah, it makes a weird sound. Yeah, Jeb can fix it.
Do we all remember Yugos?
No, he can't.
So automobile from Yugoslavia, was that what it is?
That's what it was.
Yeah. No, Jeb was not appealing to
It's amazing that the family has so much money that they spend $150 million without actually doing some type of field research.
No, they raised it. Well, no, you don't really know what you're going to get until you're out there.
Yeah.
And every candidate that's been out there has deluded himself or herself into believing that they have a good shot at winning.
Yeah.
They just don't want to hear anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
So you raise the money and you figure, oh, geez, now I'm really golden.
Well, with Citizens United also, we have this sort of unlimited deep pocket billionaires. So now all you need to have is one deluded billionaire on your side, and you can just go the distance, right? So it's just
that was last year with Sheldon Adelman, was it?
Nielsen, yeah.
So it's a strange consequence of unlimited money being this sort of endless circular firing squad on the right.
Yeah.
And it's like, this doesn't seem to be working the way they planned, and why would it? Why would anything work the way they planned? Yeah, it's been funny.
So the time is right. If you're feeling like you're having difficulty making ends meet, especially at the end of the month, realize that the only way things are going to change is if somebody adjusts the tax structure, somebody adds a little bit more to your share of things than the next guy. That's the only way things are going to change. And you need someone who's a change agent like Bernie. I mean, he's already changed Hillary. Hillary's a lot more interesting and a lot more radical than she was when she started out because she has no choice. And she will go right back to the center. Did you see where the Chamber of Commerce president was talking about how Hillary will come around eventually for the TPP?
Yeah. I mean, well, what we've seen sort of as the Republican Party has sort of embraced nonsensical social issues and sort of this absolutism, free market absolutism, the Democrats have become the business party. They become to some degree, the sort of sane, centrist business as usual. And the trouble is that business as usual isn't working. So this is the sort of intense dissatisfaction people feel around Hillary, is that, you know, if there was some sort of center that was holding, she would be a good candidate. And but people aren't experiencing that. People aren't experiencing the sense that we need, you know, a little some minor tweaks, some changes around the edges, a slightly gentler face on what we've had. And so yeah, it's the dissatisfaction with Hillary is amazing to me, and the depth of it and the sort of intensity of it is the most shocking thing I feel about the current primary season.
Well, you know, the other thing that's almost, it's just not so inconsistent. They talk about Bernie not being electable. Mm-hmm. And he polls better against any of the Republicans than Hillary does. And Hillary has depending on which poll you're reading, she has from a 53 to a 58% unfavorable rating out amongst the general population. Yeah. So whoever's going to compete against her already has a good shot at getting a majority.
Yeah, well, the pro-Hillary argument goes that, you know, she's a known quantity, she's been tested, they've been beating on her for 20 years, all the negatives are known, and that, you know, this, in the end, will be able to, you know, patch her up and sell her to people. And it's always been like, really, this doesn't seem like a lot of fun. And, you know, in 2008, it was the same thing with Obama. And, you know, Obama was shinier and funner and more interesting.
Well, she didn't have an FBI team tracking down all her stuff, which is, right now there are 100 FBI agents involved in Hillary investigations.
Yeah.
So what would actually happen? Let's just look at this. Hillary gets the nomination for the Democratic Party, and they begin the indictment for passing on highly confidential information to potentially to others.
That's a good question.
This would be a situation, a scenario in which new Democratic Party law would be initiated, while they would go back and try to find another candidate to replace Clinton, who is under indictment.
It's an interesting question. If it all depends on the timing of things. If it happens before the primary season is over, then Bernie's going to, you know, clean up. If it happens afterwards, once the convention nominates her, I have no idea. You're in very strange territory.
Right. We were mentioning in our discussion for today, why is it that the American public has such a difficulty in recognizing what candidate would best fulfill their interests, the interests of 70 million Americans?
I think you're always going to have a segment of the population that's going to vote against their own best interests. They've been doing it, you know, for decades now, because some of these social issues are just so overriding for them, and you can't change that. What you can be clear about is when you are on somebody's side, as opposed to someone who professes to be on their side, but in reality is just another paid stooge for the 1%.
Well, I'd read these pieces about sort of looking at red states and people in red states voting against their best interests, and the sort of reality that there is this a group of people who are just barely holding their heads above water, who are managing to not take much in the way of services, and they really define themselves as people who don't use services. And so the idea of like some kind of tiny tax cut is more appealing to them than the idea that the government might be able to help them. And it's this strange thing, and it's, you know, again, primarily in the South, and so it's this strange psychology that you understand it in one sense. People have this, especially Americans, I think, have this image of themselves as being self-reliant and 40 acres and a mule, and just, you know, somehow we are all, you know, world-beating entrepreneurs,
Right.
millionaires in waiting, and
We killed the mule and cooked it for food.
Yeah, well,
months ago.
Yeah, it's we don't, you know, it doesn't seem to work that way in the real world.
It's true. I think Sanders is the first candidate since the New Deal to criticize the system enough and put forward a program that's realistic enough so that the vast majority of Americans can find in that candidate a real change in the structure of America.
I think Jimmy Carter kind of touched on it. I don't think things were as bad as they are now, so I don't think the message resonated as deeply. But Jimmy Carter was, if you remember back then, I mean, I was excited about Carter back then. He was a voice of change. You know, he wasn't going to lie to you. He wasn't going to go and kill foreign leaders who he didn't like, stuff like that. Unfortunately, he got sidewinded by the media and the polished press and polished Illuminati in Washington.
Well, and stagflation, the economy was in a bad place, and the same sort of medicine that anyone would have used, the Federal Reserve kind of medicine that both parties endorsed, he deployed, and so we lived through a really bad patch there economically, and so he caught the blame for that. The Democrats are always to blame when the economy is down, and when the economy is up, it's for some reason not the Democrats that did that either. So there were some reasons for...
and he also got hit with Iran.
Oh, yeah.
Totally made him look feckless.
Yeah, well, the degree to which now we know that the Reagan administration's, Reagan's people's arms for hostages negotiations, preventing the hostages from being released until after the election, the sort of wide-scale treason that helped elect Reagan, which is echoed now in Iran again with this information that the GOP was talking about. Again, holding hostages until after the election. It's like it's out of their playbook. We have stories of the GOP conspiring with our enemies
against the agreement, the nuclear agreement.
Yeah. You know,
it is treason.
Yeah, and
you hear that?
a little bit of treason, you know, not a big deal for some reason. But the we've had our era of Obama and sort of the idea that his central line was that there isn't a red America and there isn't a blue America. We're the United States of America. And after red America essentially screwing him blue, if you'll pardon the expression, for the last since the midterm election loss, we're sort of at this point where it's like, no, there was a good story, it got him elected, but our politics are going to have to become a little more confrontational if we're going to move forward. And the sort of majority that's against the ACA, that's against Obamacare, is this troubling thing for the Democratic Party. And so Bernie has done this thing that you would think anyone who is trying to sell anything would do, which is to be against an unpopular thing. And so he's talking about single payer as a possible solution.
Yeah, but he's not against. He's going for the next step.
Oh yeah, no, he's not going to cut everyone loose. The Clinton campaign idea that we would just somehow scrap the ACA and let people just die in the streets while we worked on our utopian temple over here.
It's another insult to the intelligence of the American public.
Complete nonsense. Right. But it makes sense that that you talk about single payer, and again, the huge compromise that Obama made, that the Democrats made, that was sort of forced by a small number of blue dog Democrats that essentially were very hard to turn during the time period when the Democrats had absolute control of both houses of Congress. The sort of the compromise to accept what had been the GOP's own plan for health care, sort of muddies the waters as to what is the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. And Obama added, as you pointed out, a lot of sugar to mix with sort of free market poison. The individual mandate And so by the time Obama was done with their idea, they didn't recognize it, they didn't like it, they didn't want it.
But they were already just automatically rejecting anything he put forward.
Well, this is the thing. It seems like that they acted as if they'd never heard of it before. It's like the only idea that the right has had for 40 years as an alternative to single payer is the individual mandate. It's the only way to solve the free rider problem. It's, other than the individual mandate, it is also the part of the ACA that people hate the most. And so they turned on it the hardest. And your freedom is gone. They're forcing you to buy this product. And it's like, well, that's how you keep it privatized. That's the only way you can have private insurance instead of single payers, to have the individual mandate. And they still have come up with nothing. There's this idea that we'll sell stuff across state lines and that'll magically drive the price down. And it's not going to happen. That's just another fairy
the government
tale.
forces the American people to pay for things they don't want. The wars in Iraq, the wars in Afghanistan, wars of foreign shores continually, and driving up the deficit. In reference to that, the Republicans don't ever seem to find deficit spending for military a problem or wars a problem, but they just find it a problem when for instance, universal health care would be an issue, or affordable university tuition, which Sanders has advocated.
Which is supposedly an investment in the future, an investment in the country. Like if there's ever going to be, if there's going to be another generation that's prosperous, they're going to be knowledge workers, they're going to need educations. And the idea that this investment would not pay off is the radical idea.
Right.
And for some reason, this is the radicalism that the GOP is quite willing to say. So, the whole thing about the elitism, that why do we even need to go to college? There was these debates like, you're, and again, they're keying into this sort of anti-intellectualism. There's some kind of aspect of this that's in the American psyche. It resonates with some of those swing voters, those Reagan Democrats, but it's just, again, it's logically incoherent. It's
There's
like
millions of dollars in becoming a plumber. You can be a very successful plumber and own your own home, right?
No, certainly, if people are building houses,
Right.
If the economy is growing, if certainly there's the rising tide can lift all ships. I mean, during the Clinton administration, even though 9 out of 10 of the dollars were going to the 1%, at least there was a small increase for everyone across the board. And so we tolerated the sort of shift rightward, the neoliberal shift of Clinton, because there was a degree to which during that boom, the rising tide rose all ships.
Yeah.
And now we're at this place where that's not happening, and it's very clear that there are winners and losers.
Well, you've also got just a ton of money that's being poured in to basically kill this idea, kill this creature at birth. I grew up in New York City, and city college, city universities, they were all free. I mean, there was minor fees, but essentially you were not paying a fortune to go to Bronx Community College, which is what I went to, and Hunter College, my sister went to. And the world didn't fall apart because you had this socialist system going. And a lot of people that never would have been able to afford college got college.
Oh, well, the key elements of the post-war boom being, housing and education, the GI Bill and Freddie and Fannie, and so we kind of know what a boom looks like in this country. We know what the components of it are. We know that we can create it with, we can create the environment for it with government regulation, with pump priming and investment, and yet this is not. Again, the Clintonian refrain, the era of big government is over. The degree to which the sort of ever rightward tilt of the Democratic Party has sort of put all of these ideas off the table, and then Bernie brings them back on the table again. All of a sudden,
because they're at the same trough as the Republicans.
Yeah,
they're feeding off the same, pigs.
With a little bit less theocracy, and it's the same deregulation message. It's the same, and so there's these host of issues where it's hard to tell the difference. Fracking and for-profit prisons and all of these things that you would think there'd be a really clear difference between the Republican and the Democrat, and
there is none.
And there's not much.
Well, at the core of all this is corrupt campaign financing.
Yeah.
And Cambridge has the same thing in place. You know, the city council will take money from developers and then vote on their projects, which is pretty damn corrupt. It's certainly a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a 20-story tower across the street here because, because 7 out of the 9 people on the council voted for it, 6 of whom had gotten $12,000 worth of money from the developer and his attorneys.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It goes down to the micro level.
Yeah, pay to play. Yeah, the degree to which the government it sort of sets the tone. It's like this, it creates the zeitgeist, and then these decision-making styles radiate through the whole public. I've read that you can't explain the income inequality with tax policy alone. If you look at sort of the regressive taxation that's occurred for the last 30 years, this can only explain 5, 10, 15% of inequality. But when you realize that where government goes, the private sector follows, and it snowballs. And so again, when where was the Bernie thing? It's not about having to spend every dollar to fix the country. It's about setting a new direction for the country.
Get your priorities straight.
And having these decision-making styles sort of echo and reflect through the broader culture. So, yeah.
The other thing that's happened, and I don't mean to monopolize the conversation,
right ahead.
is that the issues have never been so clearly articulated. If you listen to Bernie talking, if you listen to Elizabeth Warren talking, there's no profusion of detail.
Yeah.
To totally muck up the bigger picture. They're very clear about it. This much of the percentage of the income is going to 1% or 1/10%, and we're getting, the system is rigged. The playing field is uneven.
Yeah.
When they had years ago the MBM scandal in Massachusetts, and it was about all this corruption in these developments, these projects. And this always strikes me. When I hear an unlevel playing field, I always think of this. The people that were the general contractors basically paid off some of the politicians rather than did their job. That's what the MBM was. They were the general contractors. And so at UMass, they had an auditorium balcony where you could not see the stage from the balcony. And then here again, the level playing field. Running from home plate to first base, if you have a hit, was uphill. So the home team had a disadvantage.
That's great.
Yeah, that's the reality of allowing corruption into government.
And we have massive corruption in government now. We have the Koch brothers, for instance, that can finance any campaign. And you were mentioning Adelson last year. In the last presidential election. Sanders is running on a campaign to change the way party politics is financed and election politics is financed. How do you think Sanders is going to do that?
Well, he wants publicly financed elections. That's one of the planks in his platform. How he's going to do all this stuff, it'll only be doable if he brings in a tsunami of new voters into the system. Without the millennials, without people who are disaffected, because then the same old Republicans will be put in office in a lower, you'll have the same kind of interference. So if he has enough of a mandate, and if he has enough of a congressional support base, then he'll figure out how to do it. I don't think that'll be a problem. I think the issue is getting enough of Democrats voted.
So the idea is whoever's up for re-election, governors, senators, congressmen in the various states, they should get the Democratic vote.
Yes. That's what the Republicans are sweating out now. They don't think Trump, in a general election, can bring in the coattails.
I think they're right.
I think they're right too. I think they're very right. But I think Trump has done a great job of showing what a bunch of hypocrites and jackasses they all are.
You mentioned that point. Can you elaborate on that? Can you explain that a bit more?
I think the issues that have crystallized with this buffoon up there, I mean, it's just like a court jester. You start to realize that nobody here knows what they're talking about. They're talking about carpet bombing civilian areas. I mean, why does anybody even listen to stuff like that? That's so inhumane. And he's just there saying, well, you're low energy, Jeb. And he is a low energy guy. And immediately, the truth has such power, in this case, cleansing power. I think Trump is saying what he thinks is true, and all these other guys are saying what they. If you ever listen to Marco Rubio go off about what a great country this is, you know, you want to just stand there and salute the flag in your Boy Scout uniform. It's just ridiculous. So, I think Trump and Bernie have both done the same thing. They're not business as usual. I think Trump is just somebody that 5 minutes later he'll believe something else is true than the opposite of what he just said, but he'll still say it because he believes it's true.
Yeah, I think to people for whom the have given up on trying to do something about the oligarchy, and it's sort of like, well, let's get an oligarch that's my friend. He'll be my oligarch, you know.
Right.
And the only way that makes sense is if you have some sort of organizing principle where you know that there will be winners and losers, and your group is the winner. And obviously, it's race. It's it's not like he's blinking in Morse code. He's made it very clear, who the problem.
Right.
Who the problem people are.
Right.
And this has been the most terrifying thing about him, because before this, he's been espoused sort of neoliberal centrist opinions. He's been more or less Clintonian. And even now, to some degree, he's to the left of Hillary when it comes to Social Security. He's not talking about cutting Social Security benefits, but Hillary's willing to make that negotiation when it's time to do so. And that's one of the most horrific things about Hillary, is the idea that she's a progressive who gets things done. And you're sort of like, well, what does getting things done mean, and what has it meant for the last 30 years?
How did we come to this point if that was the case?
The chicken is fully cooked.
We got Glass-Steagall, in the housing crisis, the collapse of the financial industry, and we got the Iraq War, which are these great points of bipartisan consensus. And I'm like, let's just not even, but the thing about the devil's advocate, people who ask, well, how does Bernie affect these changes? How do we move the country in some sort of progressive direction? And it's sort of like, if you think this has to happen, then the first step would have to be talking about it. You have to say it out loud,
Right.
And you're going to have to speak it clearly,
right.
And then see what you can make of the public's response to that, and that's what we've seen it happening. We've seen his opinions evolve. We've seen some meat being put on these bones, and as it's happened, we've seen the predictable cries of oh my God, this is terrible, from the people who own us,
off with their heads,
from our owners, and so it's been wonderful to watch, and again, it's sort of on the right, it's like for some reason there's money for Iraq, there's money for war, and it's as if that wealth wasn't being destroyed, right?
Yeah.
It's as if that $80,000 missile that'll kill like a couple of people that are being paid $40 a day by ISIS. As if that $80,000 missile, which represents a couple of years college education, that blows up. That's not wealth being destroyed. What destroys wealth is paying a teacher to educate a kid who can learn a skill, who could deploy that skill, and that teacher will live in a neighborhood and buy a house and buy groceries, and the money, we know that money spent in the civilian economy echoes through it. There's a multiplying effect. We know that military spending is just money poured into the sand. It's just money burned in bonfires. And the idea that it's Bernie spending that will destroy us. It's Bernie, where the Republicans have had 5 boots on the ground invasions that they've posited. If we had listened to John McCain early on in Syria, we would now be bombing ISIS and destroying the weapons we'd given them 6 months ago. Another bonfire of wealth.
Well, the other thing about wealth, creating wealth, war creates wealth. But just for a small segment, every time you blow up an $80,000 missile, they're saying, put up another $80,000 missile on the line.
Well, I had a friend who talked about Halliburton and the Iraq War and sort of the mindset. And you have people that are quite happy to burn billions in public money to personally make millions, right? So you're talking about a factor of 1,000 destruction. And the reason why they're so happy to do that is because they hate government in the first place. They hate the whole enterprise. So the fact that they're burning $1 billion of taxpayer money to make themselves $1 million richer. That isn't a bug. That's a feature. Because you've proven that government doesn't work by breaking it.
Right.
And it should maybe be just a tenet of something that if you want to hire someone for a job, they should believe the job should exist. Well, why would you hire a doctor that didn't believe in medicine? Would you hire a lawyer that doesn't believe in the law? And yet people elect the GOP and these candidates who say
kill government.
The government's the problem. It's like, well, yeah. Move to Somalia. It's utopia there, right? There's all these great stateless places where everyone has the high standard of living and the kids live to the old age and everyone's happy and everything's wonderful in these places where there's no government.
So do we feel that the people are going to vote against their own interests, or are they going to elect Sanders?
Well, here's what we were talking about. I think Sanders is still arcing. He hasn't crested yet, and who knows when that'll happen. But the media, because he loses a primary here or a primary there, immediately starts to cut him off at the knees. They're saying, oh, he can't win. He's lost Nevada. That shows you. But he lost Nevada by 4 points when he was 25 or 30 points behind a few months ago. And they can't see the long view. They just can't see it. So I'm feeling very hopeful if the media doesn't kill his opportunity, that at some point this thing will, the arc is still rising. Who knows where it's going to go? I mean, it's been amazing so far. This has been the most amazing political upsurge that I'm aware of. Obama didn't come close to this.
Certainly from the campaign spending, certainly from the 21.5% surplus of votes that he had in the primary in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of the enthusiasm gap, there's a photo I saw with some people in the background that had "Settle for Hillary" T-shirts on, and the logo was sort of the same, and people didn't quite notice, and it was just sort of like, oh, look, there are people, that's good, and so there's this enthusiasm gap. There's a lot of people voting for Hillary because they think that she's the only Democrat that can win, and they know they don't want theocracy. They know they don't want 11 new wars, and then the second Bernie wins, or that someone lets them think that Bernie can win, there's just this realignment that can occur, and so I think it's really
happened
up in the air.
after New Hampshire.
Yeah,
he raised millions and millions the next day.
Yeah, and we saw this with the Obama campaign as well. So if it was impossible for a political upstart to upset Hillary, Obama wouldn't be president. And so the idea that there is no script in which the unstoppable Hillary juggernaut can be derailed is just like, well, I don't know. Did 2008 that happen? Was I there?
All over again.
And it's so it's going to be historic no matter what. I saw this great graphic, and it was like it had 4 candidates, and it had, we either have the first Jewish president, the first woman president, the first Latino president, or the first flesh-eating lizard person president, and that was Donald Trump. And so something. It's political theater of a sort that we have not ever seen in my lifetime, right? I mean, we've never seen the degree of polarization and the sort of kind of different things being said.
This must have been what it was like when FDR was running for office.
Yeah.
Things were that bad, or worse, obviously. So it must have had that feel to it. I just saw a little video while we were next door where Dick Van Dyke was saying he endorsed Bernie, and he talked about being around for the New Deal.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize he was that old, but yeah.
Yeah.
And I think anybody that remembers how bad things were then, would certainly understand.
Yeah, and all of the the things that were said about him, and all the things that were said about the New Deal and how impossible it was, are now being said about everything that Bernie says. And again, it's like, it's not as if we don't have in modern history an example for what we can do in this country when there's a national will to do it. Mm-hmm. And so there's a progressive roadmap and formula, and how do we realize it in a new technological age, in an age with social media, and an age with a handful of companies who control most of the world's media. So there are these huge systemic and institutional forces that seem to want to perpetuate
They have to be
oligarchy.
overcome, yeah.
And at the same token, there's the disruptiveness of new technologies and the disruption that's sort of inherent in the economic model that we're in that embraces creative destruction. So we saw the Arab Spring, and we saw the degree to which people could coalesce around sort of a none of the above candidacy, and then we've also seen the problems when that breaks and you don't have a strong voice there.
Right.
And so
You get a
that's
dictatorship in Egypt.
Yeah.
Every day I go online on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
to see the latest stuff about the election.
yeah.
And that's where I know I'm going to get interesting asides into what's happening. And that's where I've been putting my ads.
Yep.
I've been doing some ads for Bernie. I'm a member of a two-person PAC committee, because he doesn't pay us anything, and we donate our efforts for free. But going online, I had one of my ads had 121 shares, so it's getting out there. Yeah,
That's terrific.
Yeah, and it was only one though, unfortunately. It was the anti-warmonger, and that seemed to get a lot of people's juices flowing.
How many ads have you put out now?
30.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Would you like to go through them in some way?
If there's any way that makes it reasonable, go ahead.
What I'd like to do, first of all, is to show something to a concept that you just had, and it's in reference to what the opinion is on war and the decision making. What we have here is an interview with Noam Chomsky from Al Jazeera. Can you hear this?
That needs to be louder.
Basically a new dealer. Now, in the current American political spectrum,
I think get it louder.
You got it louder. See if the
Eisenhower,
it's a different keyboard.
anyone who questions
Yeah, but I thought they had one. You're looking for the speaker.
There used to be an up volume key, but only in the full keyboard. That's a
Yeah.
reduced keyboard.
I agree with
Yeah, looking for the up volume.
Let me see if I can get that. Another one. It's too bad I'm not.
Oh,
previous election.
There you go.
Be, say, in Massachusetts, where we are now, which is a safe state for the Democrats, so you can vote any way you want or not vote. If you have to be in a swing state where it's going to have an effect on who becomes president, you should definitely vote. I mean, if
So you were in Ohio this November, you vote Clinton rather than Donald Trump or Ted
Oh,
Cruz?
absolutely, just as I would in 2000. I didn't like Obama, but I said exactly the same thing. There's a concept.
Hillary has your vote if you were in a swing state.
Well, let's put it that way.
Yes.
My vote would be against the Republican candidate. If you abstain, that means you're giving a vote for the Republican.
Just out of interest, very briefly, if you had to sum up, somebody says to you, Professor Chomsky, I've read your books, I've looked at US foreign policy, I've seen Hillary Clinton, I've seen President George Bush, they all seem the same to me. Why should I vote for Clinton against the Republicans? In a sentence or two, what would you say is the difference between Hillary Clinton and, say, Ted Cruz? That makes it worth voting for her against Cruz?
So there are enormous differences.
Just sum up for me what you think it is.
Carpet bombing Syria, for example, is a difference. Ted Cruz said, easy problem, we'll just carpet bomb them. What's the effect of carpet bombing? Okay? Take, say, the nuclear deal with Iran. Every Republican says they're going to kill it.
Yeah.
That's I assume if they do, that would isolate the United States. It would presumably continue between Europe and Iran. But that would be a very big step
Let's
back.
change seats.
That takes
And you'll be able to bring yours.
maybe the biggest
You'll be able to
problem
bring
we
yours
face.
up and work
Well,
with
you
it.
know, I don't want to have to work that.
Every Republican candidate,
You know how to do
either a
that.
climate change denier or a skeptic who says you can't do it. What they're, just a minute, what they are saying is,
listed one
let's
after another.
destroy the world.
Each of your
Is that worth voting
campaigns.
against? Yeah. There was a meeting in
Yeah, that's what, it was on my,
Paris. It
my
did not
website that
come up
way.
with
You can just scroll down that way. It's
finding.
easier than clicking.
The major reason
I
was
don't know
it
if I'll
didn't
be able to
pass
get them on
the
full
Republican
screen. I've tried to
Same
get
thing
them on full
domestically,
screen.
the
It doesn't
policies
seem
are
to
quite different.
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I agree
Yeah,
with you.
well, if you can't, then it's no point in talking about it because you're not going to be able to.
Neuroscientist
see
and
him.
liberal atheist author Sam Harris, who you've had an online debate with, he says he'd rather Republican candidate Ben Carson, who said a Muslim shouldn't be president, has compared Syrian refugees to dogs. He said that Harris has said he would rather Carson be president of the United States than you, because Carson apparently gets the threat from so-called jihadi terrorists that you don't. What's your response to Sam Harris, who claims to be a liberal?
I don't bother with Sam Harris. This is he specializes in hysterical, slanderous charges that he doesn't like. That's of no interest to me. I'm not concerned with jihadi terrorism. I'm much more concerned with it than he is. That's why I say you don't just scream at it. You look at the roots, you try to figure out how to deal with it, you respond to it. I don't take him seriously. I don't see any point in talking about him. But
Well, some people say the point about talking about it is we live in an environment where Islamophobia is on the rise in the United States, across the West. There are some who say that the new atheists, people like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, the late Christopher Hitchens, are Islamophobes, guilty of an almost obsessive anti-Muslim bigotry, which is worrying in the current climate. Do you share that view?
I don't talk about them. First of all, I don't think it's true of Dawkins. It might have been true of Hitchens in his later years. Harris, I assume, denies it, but when I read what he says, that's what it looks like. However, the problem of Islamophobia is, of course, serious. It's just like the problem of anti-Semitism is serious. This is much worse, Islamophobia now. For one thing, it is undermining us. If Islamophobia, apart from what it's doing to decent, honorable people who are subject to denunciation, physical attacks, blocking of the possibilities for decent life.
What is there in this that you want to share?
It's harmful to the
Right there.
West.
Right here.
Islamophobia leads to proposals like, let's carpet bomb them, let's hit them with a sledgehammer. But just take a look at what it's led to in the last 15 years. There's been what's called a global war on terror. When it began, there's been one device to deal with it, sledgehammer. Smash them up. Don't find out what's going on, smash them up. What's happened? 15 years ago, it was confined to a tiny tribal area in Afghanistan.
That's
Now
not
it's all
quite
over
true.
the world. Every time you hit it with a sledgehammer, you expand it.
One thing that's interesting is that
Afghanistan.
there's much more non-Islamic terror in the world than there is Islamic terror, but no one cares because it's all these different regional separatist movements and under different banners. But again, it's like, there's this tiny subset of terrorism that we're really excited about and we're really energized by.
Well, it's not unlike our reaction to violence, black violence. What we saw as criminal element. Most black violence is visited on black population.
Yeah.
So none of us have to worry much about it, but it's just that same sort of distortion. Our fears tend to distort everything.
There is an incredible amount of violence in the American society, much more than in any other nation worldwide. We have more incarcerations, we have more deaths from gun violence or from automobile violence than any other nation in the world. It's part of our DNA, it's part of our culture, or is it part of the battle that we have just to get the resources that we need at an individual level?
Well, the sort of mass incarceration state, the trajectory that where we reached this a place where we have more people in prison than any state in the history of humanity. We're worse than Stalin during the gulags. Unfortunately, begins is accelerates under the Clinton administration, and we during this sort of period of zero tolerance, 3 strikes you're out, all of this stuff, which the Clintons were for, and which even Bernie voted for, some of these mass incarceration bills. And I think back to that time period, and I think back to all I can remember is the Central Park rapist case. And the way we reason from anecdotes. We reason from dramatic, singular events, and we have a tendency to ignore things which are far more important statistically, numerically, there's a degree to which the news is sort of free reality-based programming, and we're only interested in stories that have understandable villains and explosions and fire. All of the criteria for a summer action film apply to the news, and so we don't want to hear about domestic gun violence killing more people than have died in every war we've ever been in, right? So you'd think if being murdered matters, then that which has killed more Americans than anything else is our domestic gun hobby, and we are more of a threat to ourselves than everyone else in the world. Just by the sheer numbers of it, just the number of dead bodies, we are more dangerous to ourselves than any other people on Earth. But it's not an interesting story because we don't care.
It's not interesting. The thing that we enjoy doing is we enjoy cleaning up Dodge City. So if we have a problem with drugs, we have a war on drugs.
Yeah.
If we have a problem with poverty, we have a war on poverty, as though we can go in with our military armor and wipe out whatever it is we have a problem with, and it doesn't work that way.
Well, you have the wrong metaphor, you get the wrong solution, right? So you have like the war on drugs. So the drug abuse and addiction is a medical problem, and I remember I saw a great show on this in which they polled the entire law enforcement establishment, and a majority said this is a public health problem. This is not a law enforcement problem. We're trying to fix. So even people in law enforcement know that drug addiction is a public health problem, and so the war on drugs is lost the second you have the wrong metaphor. And Chomsky's talking about the war on terror. Exactly the same thing.
Right.
The second you're going to have you call it a war, you're going to completely ignore the underlying realities,
analyzing it,
and thinking about it in a thoughtful way. I remember there's the story of the jihadis and their incredible fundamentalism and their encyclopedic knowledge of the Quran, and then there's these weird facts that you bump into where they're buying Islam for dummies before they strap on the suicide vest because they basically don't really know Islam, and the degree to which when you talk to soldiers and the people that were fighting, it's $40 a day.
Right.
And I've often thought, could I pay him $50? Could we just, bidding
war on terror.
Yeah. I mean, it's just sort of it's like, oh, you don't want to do, but it's just, it's incredible because again, $50 that adds up, but that's that $80,000 missile. That's a lot of $50 a day.
But that's what they were doing in Afghanistan. They were buying the tribal chieftains.
For a short time period, they could do that.
Right.
The trouble is they didn't stay bought. But it does make you wonder what could be possible if we
invested our money more wisely.
Move towards development,
a little bit more creative in how we solve problems.
Here's your part of your ad campaign here, Paul. It's the one with a deal. We've been talking about a deal, making a better deal, or investing our money more wisely.
Yeah, well, this ad is talking about obviously the usual spiel, though I spelled spiel wrong. Shouldn't be an H there apparently, but it's basically talking about what's happening here with Trump and with Bernie being out there, and they're not giving you the usual spiel. You're getting something that's very different, and there's not much more that I need to say about that because everybody really knows it. That's the funny thing. Even though they listen and they buy into what they're hearing, they know that they're being played for fools with most of this stuff.
How do I get the next ad here? Do you know how you get the next ad on your...
I don't.
Would I click up here?
Try it.
PDF viewer or?
No, that doesn't quite do it. There should be, well, I don't know.
Well, clicked on one and you opened to one.
Yeah, so why don't you go back?
Go back to the Finder. Just close that little red dot up in the upper left and now find the folder. Don't save.
All right, we're just taking a moment out for technical difficulties. Please stay with us.
Would you like to try this?
Let's see here.
Jay?
Let me see.
We get some technical
Sure
assistance
thing.
here. I turned it at a 90-degree angle.
Yes.
Oh yeah, let's cancel here.
Okay. See, I can't read that.
Yeah, I know I can't read it either. Hit OK. Maybe it'll go away.
Okay,
All
so
right. This is the top one. This is the one we want.
so that's the go into the Bernie ads folder. See the top one there? There's only one folder on the right column.
Oh, on the right. Got it.
On the
Okay.
top. That's got the Bernie ads in it.
Okay, let's see. It just shrunk over.
Okay, now go to here. These are all the ads starting with
Got it.
not the top. Top
Yeah.
doesn't have it. It should say Bernie
Bernie
ad number one.
There we go.
So, yeah.
So if we do is we grab all of them and double click, it'll give us a browser view in the PDF thing. So now we have these thumbnails.
Okay, now you just click on one of the thumbnails.
Yeah, now you can click through them in the thumbnails like this. Or you can page through them like this. All right.
So you got them.
So which ones do you want to...
This is the first one right here. You can
Okay.
We're coming back.
analyze right there.
Yeah.
Okay, this is actually this is the ad that I did that was never meant
No problem.
to be. This was meant to show the Bernie campaign, how they could send out an email without boring the pants off their audience. Just try to find a fun way of saying it, and you would have clicked on the contribute button, and then you would have sent in all your money. But it's just a personality, adding a little voice to it. The thing about these ads, you can click on a couple of others, is that they're written with this headline that becomes the first line and generally the last line of the text.
Up and down.
And there's something about that that had an energy to it that I totally was surprised by. It totally took me by surprise. It makes, generally copy-heavy ads are not read. It's just sort of the reality. People are too lazy, they don't have time. And these ads are more engaging and I think more easily read than a lot of ads. So,
The content is good too.
well, thank you. I like to think so. But start from the top because ultimately, from the first,
All the way.
all the way to the top.
Keep going to the up. Yeah.
Now, this one was meant to start inoculate. I thought there would be a big issue with Bernie being a socialist, and it hasn't quite played itself out yet, but I think it will be there. So I wanted an ad to just inoculate him, at least get the issue out there and have people start to think about it. And that I did with the second one as well, where I talk about him being,
America is certifiably gun crazy,
no, is that the second?
I believe.
Oh, then the third, I'm sorry. Yeah, then the issue of him being Jewish and his electability. That's what this ad was meant to start to inoculate him against. So
The Jewishness is Bernie Sanders was the first Jew ever to win a primary.
Yeah, it's
And
amazing.
that went completely unnoticed apparently.
It was mentioned by a few, but certainly was not the major headline.
So that hurdle was already taken apparently and easily.
yeah, so if you read this ad, it starts out, can a Jew from Brooklyn become mayor of Burlington, Vermont? Because that was a big question mark way back in the early 80s when Bernie first ran for the mayorality.
Back in '86 or something like that, wasn't it?
Maybe even been before
82.
that. So, yeah, somewhere in that area. And obviously he's won. I've heard he had 4 wins, and I thought it was 3 wins. But he's won 3 or 4 times, been reelected 2 or 3 times to the mayor's position.
And he's done a terrific job apparently.
And he's done a terrific job, and he worked with a city council that was mostly Republican. I hear the first year was a little shaky, but everybody sort of at some point figured out what he was about. And he solved problems. He didn't let developers just go in and take over an area. He made the developers work with the people in the area, and it generally worked to everybody's advantage. So,
Next was be careful.
oh, this clown is dangerous. This was my tribute to Donald Trump in the earlier days, and it just talked about the fact that somebody who's in such a visible position talking about such hateful things as keeping Muslims out of the country and building a wall, that it wasn't, it had some dangerous ripples that it was sending out, I thought.
No, it continues to be shocking and
Yes.
and terrible. The most recent one is this myth of an Islamic insurgency being put down by executing 50 Muslims with bullets dipped in pig's blood. And this is a story that Trump told yesterday.
Really?
And it's on Snopes. It's fake. It's made up.
Oh, it's
but you'll
complete.
hear this in sort of certain circles that, you know, if we just
Douse our bullets in pig blood.
or we say we'll bury the bodies of terrorists in pigskins, which will mean that they can't get to heaven. And this is not particularly, this isn't good theology, it's just made up.
This is kind of like what went on in India, where the Hindus were told that they were putting some sort of pig element in the bullets.
That's right. That's right.
And they didn't want to fire any of the guns.
They didn't want to touch the bullets.
Yeah, they didn't want to have anything to do with it.
And
Amazing.
but it's not. But yeah, so
When is this finally going to come to America with Americans fundamentalists and all the ridiculous things that many American fundamentalists think about? For instance, that global warming doesn't exist.
well, there's this sort
Not in
of
the Bible, it can't exist.
there's this there's a part of the evangelical base which has these very extreme opinions. We saw them vote for Cruz, right? Who is detestable just visually. I mean, just there's a autonomic response of
Cringe.
seeing Ted Cruz,
Cringe,
of
yes.
just wanting to leave the room or cover his face. And the evangelicals convinced themselves that he was their guy, and they're able to kind of hold their noses and vote for him. So there's this element of the evangelical base that is profoundly motivated, and but they're not a lot of the country, and we could see this amongst Catholics that we know that a majority of Catholics vote for pro-choice Democrats.
Let's get a
even
better
though
message up there.
yeah.
Let's get a better message up there.
Yeah. There's a minority of
Talk about it, sure.
of fundamentalist Americans that can be sort of brought in, but they can't win the whole country. You know, it's not.
That must be what the Republicans are really worried about.
Well,
They
they're
have
worried
that
about
every
losing
year.
it.
I mean, Romney going against Romney Care in order to conform to what he saw as the party's point of view about health care. I mean, he just absolutely sold his soul in front of the entire country.
It's true.
Yeah.
So this ad was meant to start dealing with the reality of the choice that we have, Hillary or Bernie, in the Democratic primary process. And I was mostly focused here on the bias within the Democratic National Committee in favor of Hillary and obviously against Bernie. And they've done everything from limit the number of debates to, and I don't think it's necessarily such a pointed thing on their parts, but the reality of the superdelegate process
Yeah.
already has slanted the field in Hillary's favor. So there's all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and then that moment when they cut him off from his own donors, you know, that list got cut off. They were too quick to react, and they obviously have Hillary's best interest at heart. So this ad was meant to start shining the light on it, and then there's an ad later on where I specifically go after Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's becoming quickly infamous in Democratic circles, and I'd be interested to see if she survives this whole process.
Well, how will the party come together if Bernie isn't the candidate, and how do we come together and defeat Trump, let's say, after all this has happened, and the sort of strange tone-deaf things that Hillary is saying that we know will make it difficult for us to support her, in the general election, make you wonder about her ability to win that election, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that she, is insulting her own base needlessly, it seems like, frequently, into saying these things. When Gloria Steinem and Madame Albright said there was a special place in hell for women who didn't vote for Hillary, and 90% of all women under 30 are for Bernie, and then Hillary said, "Oh, grow up, grow a thick skin," and you're being too politically correct. And the thing that's amazing about that is this is what men's rights activists and gamergaters say. And literally, grow a thicker skin has been this retort from people that are annoyed by third wave feminism, who are annoyed by Black Lives Matter. And so there's this weird sense in which, oh my God, she's just utterly pissed off this base, when there was another way to say it. There was another way to say, vote for me because I have experience. Vote for me because I am I'm a known quantity. I've been working for this stuff my whole life. Don't tell people to grow a thicker skin. So I keep bumping into Hillary saying and doing these things, and that seem calculated to infuriate the base. But the thing is that, and this is the degree to which it's a script from the 90s, because the Clinton administration used to sort of like when the ACLU was angry at it. Because the ACLU was perceived as being too far to the left, outside the mainstream of political. Here they are defending Nazi marchers in
Right.
in the Midwest.
Right. And don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah,
What kind of stupidity is
and
that?
so there was this. So I think that Hillary is maybe mistaking the temperature of our times in feeling like, oh wow, I'm going to position myself at the center by sort of using these terms like political correctness, but it's not. We're not there anymore. That the center is moving.
But I can't help but think that Madeleine Albright just said something she thought would be powerful, and it turned out to have a lot of power, but it went the wrong way. And Gloria Steinem saying that that's where the boys are. Why all the young women are supporting, that's where the boys are, is absolutely so patronizing.
Oh, it was. You couldn't say something. If you wanted to make a statement to piss off third wave feminists, you couldn't have said a worse thing. And Madame Albright's others quote recently that sticks in your mind is the 50,000 dead children in Iraq were worth it. That the Iraq War was a good thing, and we see all the wonderful things it's created, like ISIS, and and it was worth 50,000 innocent children being slaughtered by our tax dollars. And it's just sort of like, wow, I get that,
Why is she defending the Iraq War?
Well, Hillary voted for it, right? So, so it's like there's
Hillary now says it's a mistake. She will admit.
And this is the thing is that, we saw with Kerry what being for and against the Vietnam War gets you. You don't win the election, maybe there's a way to spin that and finesse that. I kind of like Kerry in some ways. He seemed like a guy who was a smart guy, had some integrity, but there's a degree to which you can't square every circle. You can't be everything to everybody. And as you hear it in Hillary, you saw it in Bill, and it's just this. It seems like this is not the moment we're in. And there's this weird thing where Americans, like authentic candidates. They like people that are speaking from the heart, even if they disagree with them, right? Part of Reagan's appeal was that people thought he was genuine. And people that were against Reagan's policies kind of liked him because they thought that he was somehow sincere. It's this very weird thing where we like sincerity. And we.
Well, I think Reagan's sincere. I think he was very sincere. He just he could care less about somebody that had to eat ketchup for lunch.
What was amazing was you could poll people. You could tell people Reagan's policies, and they would just say those aren't his policies because I like this guy and I resonate with him. So there's a degree to which the facts didn't matter with Reagan, and you hope the same kind of stupidity could help us elect Sanders, right? You know, you hope that the same. I think it was like, well, you know, he believes what he's saying. He's passionate. He's not corrupt. He's not a womanizer. You know, it's like, oh, but he's a socialist. He's for all these things you hate. He's like, well, I don't know. He's a straight shooter. Maybe I'll vote for him because you know, we're in this moment where it's not like right or left. It's establishment or anti-establishment.
Right.
So
hope that's
we
the
see
case.
that.
Right.
Yeah, we see that with Trump, and so if Trump, so what does it say about the Democratic Party that it wants to offer up the most establishment centrist kind of thing imaginable? It's sort of like in this moment when Trump continues to defy all reason, logic, proportion. You know, everyone has just said he's going to be gone tomorrow. He's a clown. There's no way he can win. There's no way he can win. He keeps winning. He keeps winning. He keeps
And
winning.
he's projected to win.
And yeah, it's
the
incredible.
absence of a filter. It's not. It just seems to come from a place that people haven't seen things coming from.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare scenario. It's truly a nightmare scenario, and the precedent for that is fascist Germany in 1932. They could not find a party that would carry the majority.
Yeah.
So Hindenburg, who was what they called Reichspräsident then, gave the authority to Hitler to form a government, a majority government. He coalesced with the extreme right and center right, was elected chancellor in the first round, eliminated Congress, the Reichstag immediately, and they were never back in power. He implemented complete control, the Emergency Powers Act, and we were on our way to the Second World War and 50 million dead and the destruction of all of Europe. And to be quite honest, I'm not certain that this won't happen again with someone like Donald Trump because of simply what he says. It's so off the wall at times.
Well, he talks about it's as if there's a way to brush aside these niceties and just get to the result that we want without worrying about due process, the Constitution, the rest of the world, you know. And so there's this idea that we're going to have this guy, this straight shooter, that's not going to be this dirty, hairy guy that's not going to worry about reading people their Miranda rights. He's just going to blow them away.
And solve our problem. But we get back to exactly what Chomsky was saying. If you use a hammer and hit on it, it spreads out. And it
doesn't work. If this worked, we would have done it. And it doesn't work.
I don't worry about him having that much power and wanting that much power because I don't think that's who he is. And I don't think that's the game he's playing. He's not somebody out for power because he believes in anything. He's somebody out to have a good time, quite honestly.
But it's a degree to which it feels like he is now, like he may have started this as a hoot, but now he's like drinking his own Kool-Aid.
I think he is.
There is this scary...
He's riding the wave.
There's this, and he doesn't ever admit that he's wrong. So what I fear is that he could start down these roads and then rather than admit that he has no idea what he's doing, that there essentially would be these repercussions and we would just, one step after the other, we'd be falling down this hill into this thing that we didn't understand. And you think about think about the internment camps for the Japanese, you think about the terrible things we have been able to do within our constitutional framework, and with Trump having those powers, it's horrific, right? It's just because
I'm a lot more worried about another generation of kids not being able to taking on crushing debt than I am worried about him taking away our rights. I really, it's just my reality in terms of what I think is happening out in this world. You've already got families that can't make it. You've got old people that can't make it. You got students that can't make it. I'm much more worried about at some point somebody doing something.
Oh yeah, no. If not now, when? If not after the historic election of our first African American president, because I was this sort of Clintonian centrist last time around, and I thought the best candidate would be John Edwards. Right? This is how we win.
Wow.
He's a white guy from the South.
Right.
And he's good looking. He's got great hair.
Right.
And there's no way. This is the way. Play it safe. Black guy and the woman. Maybe some here, maybe 10 years from now, maybe 1,000 years from now, I don't know. Someday I want that to happen. But right now, let's go with John Edwards. Of course, John Edwards was a time bomb waiting to explode with mistresses and love children. So what the hell do I know, right? And so now this time around, I'm like, people tell me, oh, Bernie can't win. I'm like, well, I knew Obama couldn't win.
Yeah.
I knew that, and then he did. But so I'm excited about that.
But the difference, I think, is that Edwards said what I wanted to hear, but I don't think he believed it. I think he found his own spiel, and he just stuck with it. I think what Bernie's saying, he's believed in for the last 45 years.
He's exercised it.
And nobody's is going to have as much credibility in saying what I want to hear as Bernie.
Well, I believe Edwards believed what he said too, but he was a flawed vessel, and he was never going to go anywhere. And Bernie passes that smell test, that sniff and scratch test of authenticity. That sort of is the thing that, it elected Bush over Gore, for that matter. There was something about Gore that was unappealing. And of course, even though he won the general election, and he actually won the electoral vote, if you bothered to count the votes and you didn't just
The
stop
election was
the process.
stolen.
It was a stolen election.
2 stolen elections, and the media did nothing about it. They quivered in their boots.
No, it was 2000 was horrific.
It's amazing.
When interesting to put these two things together. When Robert Kennedy Jr. had a cover story in the Rolling Stone about Bush's stealing the election, the Bush government went after the New York Times that very same week for something that they published. They said that was violating state secrets, and it was in my mind, those two things were totally connected. They didn't want the mainstream media to get caught up in this story that Kennedy was pushing.
But the good news was, when Obama was elected, because before Obama was elected, you could have looked at the last couple of elections and wondered, do we even still have a democracy? Because we have these electronic voting machines that were owned by these Republican-controlled companies, and you had to wonder, are these things even hooked up anymore? And then Obama wins, and you're like, oh, there still is a democracy.
As long as you win by a big enough
They can
margin,
steal
majority.
only 1 to 3 points. They can steal a point here, they can steal a point there.
Right.
They can't steal 20 points. They can't steal 10 points. So
This election,
Bernie,
you got to win by more than a point or two, because otherwise,
it'll be stolen.
They'll steal it. And we know that the voter suppression efforts are there. We know we got the poll tax in the form of the identification requirements. So we know that that there's still a problem with the electronic voting and how that works out. The debug machines, there's still troubles with that. But we also know, because this is the horrific problem with the Kerry election was, when it was determined that the exit polls weren't matching the critical districts in Ohio that decided the election, it was suddenly decided that there were these valued voters who somehow were invisible to pollsters, or they had like kryptonite, or they ran away from them. So the non-falsifiable values voters materialized in certain districts to elect Bush, the second time around. And so you do wonder, we don't want to...
Florida and Ohio both had exit polls that said the right guy won.
Oh, yeah. And exit polls have always been right in every election till now.
And nobody questioned it. They just, to me, the New York Times absolutely laid down, rolled over, played dead.
And we can expect it in the future.
Well, the horrific thing,
Absolutely.
The horrific thing was, because I gave money to Kerry, because he said he would fight for every last vote. He said that if this happened again, that he would have court cases, he would do X, Y, Z, and he rolled over instantly.
I know.
And at that point, I was just like, is there still a Democratic Party? Is there still, do we still have a democracy? And it was sort of like an agnostic, I was like, to some degree agnostic about it. And then Obama's elected, and you realize, we still do have one. It's got a lot of problems, has a lot of flaws, there's a lot of institutional...
I'm going to take a break here. I'll be right back.
Okay. Sure. But we still have a democracy. It's corrupt, it's damaged in a lot of ways, but it's still possible to create change. And Obama represents a pulling back from the brink, and you can see it in 100 graphs, all those graphs which the conservatives don't care about, of unemployment and the stock market and everything going to hell, and then sort of it slowly climbing back up.
Don't you find it amazing, Jay, that the Republican Party is able to manipulate the public's voice, consciousness, and perceptibility by blocking everything that Obama has done,
Yeah.
and then saying now he's completely ineffective?
Oh, yeah.
Don't you find that amazing?
What was amazing was that they stated it as their goal, that they wanted to make him a one-term president, and they would do anything at the cost. So if it meant hurting their own voters, if it meant hurting their own people, that was this little strategic thing that was acceptable to do. And this was the reason why it was, it was important to stop any kind of health care reform in this country at all costs. Because if that worked, the conservatives, the GOP saw themselves losing like another New Deal and being in the wilderness for another generation or two, right? So it's vitally important that government not be perceived as being able to help people.
That's an excellent point.
And so, so they pulled out all the stops against Obamacare, and we got this reform, which is moderately better than the status quo, and which could be a framework that could be built upon and move towards something that's better than what we have. And we got this incremental improvement. And the trouble is, all of the incremental improvements of the Obama era haven't been able to do much about income inequality and about sort of these big structural problems that we have. And we see it in sort of Black Lives Matter. We see it in, the food stamp numbers. We see this this deep. We see this sort of deep divide, and we see it in the Occupy placards that people are still holding up, and so Occupy was the American Arab Spring, and it was the none of the above candidate, and the Bernie Sanders has stepped into that role and said, well, I'll be that candidate. What are the things you have on your placard? No health care. I'll give you free health care. No, education's crippling me. I'll give you free education. It's like, okay, well, now I need a job. And that's, of course, the sticking point. And it's sort of like, that's the place where the bugbear, the boogeyman of, you're going to destroy the economy with ruinous taxation, and the private sectors, the job creators will all flee to another dimension where there's less taxes or something. They'll stop participating in American culture, like Amazon will just close and Walmart will shut down, and all the billionaires will go live in other countries,
and we'll be wrecked, right?
That's right. Yeah, we'll be gone.
So here's one of the campaign strategies that Paul came up with: liars, high flyers, and
Bear greed. Oh
bear
my.
greed. So what was your idea then brought forward on that about liars? You weren't talking about Hillary Clinton and the fact that she flip-flops and lies continually.
No. This is all about the campaign finance system and about the corruption that allowed people to get off scot-free from putting the economy into a basket. And Bernie has talked about the fact that he finds it unacceptable that some poor black kid can go to jail and get a prison record or an arrest record that he lives with for life for stealing $10 worth of groceries or something like that. And these guys that absolutely trash the economy with fraudulent mortgage-based bonds, they just get away scot-free. They just Goldman Sachs paid a $5 billion fine. And nobody's going to jail, nobody has a record. And the reality is, because of the savings and loan situation in the 90s, they've extended the period under which these people can be prosecuted. So there's still a chance that somebody might go to jail if Bernie wins. I'm hoping.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
I think it's a 10-year
Statute of limitations.
statute of limitations. I think they've made it 10 years now.
Well, there's so many places where the Bernie message is so unequivocal and so clear that it seems like it could actually make a difference. So, you know, the position on for-profit prisons, Bernie recently came out and said, I'm going to get rid of them. They're going to be gone.
They're horrible. That's just horrible.
And of course, when they're contributing to your campaign, you have a harder time saying that. Now, Hillary has refunded the money from the for-profit prisons, but it's obvious that a for-profit prison, and we know there was a case where the Texas judge was being paid by a for-profit prison.
Two judges. There were
two judges.
Yeah.
To deliver the maximum sentences
For juveniles.
for juveniles, generally poor black juveniles,
Right.
because it would make money. Yes,
Oh, God.
they caught these people. So these are people literally selling their countrymen into bondage, into servitude,
Right.
for a couple of bucks.
Right.
And this is the kind of thing that can happen when you have a system that's profiting on human misery. So yeah, it should not be a profit center. You know, prisons should never be a profit center.
Incredible.
You know.
I mean, that's completely without any moral basis. It's frightening.
And Bernie can clearly state that he's against it in this way that the traditional Democratic candidate is hedging and humming and hawing, and maybe there's places where the private sector can step blah blah blah, and suddenly there's no way you can't tell the difference between parties anymore, and who cares? And it just doesn't matter.
It's getting scary because now they're starting to sell off water, and water is the lifeblood of life. Without water, you can't live. And
You can only live for 3 days. That's it.
Bolivia almost had a revolution to get their water rights back because the water was sold, and all of a sudden the peasants had no water.
Yeah, privatizing water is this next.
Isn't that what Republicans do? Isn't that what Republicans do? They sell off.
They want to
rights?
privatize. I mean, they want to privatize the MBTA here, which I don't think is a bad idea in terms of trying to get control of an agency that's out of control, expense-wise.
But what would the price of a single fare then be?
No, but I think the idea makes sense only in light of that. What you'll end up with will not be something that will be a better system, and I think that's where it falls apart. I think they have to figure out a way, because the union is so powerful, they have to figure out a way to somehow force the union to be a little bit more negotiating, or at least a little more amenable. But so the issue that you can somehow eliminate problems by privatizing the service is garbage. It's bullshit. That's what a government exists for. And he's not talking about tuition-free private universities. He's talking about public universities, which are already socialist in concept.
It's true.
Yeah.
So what the hell is people's problems with that? And healthcare, I mean, what is so hard to understand about the country allowing its people to be free from having to worry about onerous debt burden for the rest of their lives if somebody in their family gets critically injured?
What's so despicable about that concept?
Well, the American exceptionalism there, right? That the rest of the civilized world can have this thing, and that the leader of our progressive party can say it's never going to happen here, and then a week later change your tune and stop saying that, because Hillary in 2008 said, let's as Democrats never just say that single payer is impossible. And then in response to Bernie's single payer, she's like, well, it's never going to happen here. And then a couple of days later, she's like, well, of course we all believe in the single payer healthcare. And again, so part of getting something is being willing to say what you want and being able to say it out loud.
She's got $3.5 million from the pharmaceutical, and
21 million or so, I believe, was your figure on
21.5 for the Wall Street and investment houses. But she's got $3.5 million for pharmaceutical and healthcare related. So she's got a lot of money that she can still pick up there. So she's got to be careful.
So this is a campaign that you had, Paul. Bernie's 2.5 million. I guess that was at donors?
Yes, individual donors. Actually, I just yesterday ran the update of that, which was 4 million.
Wow, terrific.
Yeah. Though yesterday I saw in the paper that, one of the emails I got said that there'd been over 4 million donors, because I had been waiting for that figure to come out.
Never happened before.
I don't think so.
At this time of the campaign, this has never happened before.
So what you've got is an incredibly energized base, and people that will make up for the money that Hillary's getting and that the others will get from vested interests.
Are you optimistic?
I don't know where this ride can take us. It's fun. A month ago, I never would have thought we would be where we are. And I keep saying, if the media doesn't crap on Bernie's energy, he's got good energy, we don't know how high this arc can rise before it crests. So right now, some people say that he lost Nevada. I say that Nevada was actually a pretty good
it's not
outcome.
It's not a winner-take-all state. He only is down by a few delegates.
Right.
He
15 to 19.
came up 25 points, right? In a short
25
period
to
of
30
time.
points.
Well, we know where the media fares with its inevitable candidates. Jeb was inevitable. So the story can change, and
But they only see the milestones in terms of these events. These events aren't geared towards any individual's progress as a political machine.
Yeah.
So they don't even want to know about it. They just want to know who won in Nevada.
Yeah.
Who won in Nevada? Bernie didn't win. Oh my goodness, something's happening.
Well, but on the GOP side, though, it's always been that as Trump wins everything, it's always been like, well, if you add up all the other candidates, put them all together, smush them all together into like an Ultron GOP candidate,
right.
Then they'll all the non-insane GOP people will all vote for one guy. They just have to decide who that guy is.
Right.
And now it's like, ooh, this doesn't happen. They keep hemorrhaging to Trump, and then we saw that in the debates. Anyone who criticized Trump, their numbers went down. So if there was this sort of centrist GOP thing that was going to emerge, right? Then when you attacked him, you would have gone up. But there isn't. There is no GOP base which is excited by establishment GOP candidates for that matter.
He's the only one that has people excited, and just like Bernie has people excited.
Yeah, and it's
and it would be nice. I mean, one I put online today is further down here.
Let's get a look at it.
The brash angry. Keep going.
It's time for everyone.
No, he must have
Sanders?
gone by it. Go to number 9 on the list. Go back to number 9.
Do you know what number these are?
No, I don't.
Okay, let's go back up now.
Just keep going up. There it is. Go back. It says the brash, angry billionaire versus the grumpy old man.
Good title.
Yes. I tried out a branding moniker for Bernie, which is not particularly. I've seen other people use it, the grumpy old man.
Yeah.
But there's something very familiar about it, very likable, and at the same time, very accessible. And so this ad, for some reason at the time, I was thinking about Bernie versus Trump, and.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I saw this quote the other day, which is that Bernie Sanders isn't just another old white guy; he's the old white guy. And it was just hysterical, right? The things that people are doing with the sort of meme, the photographs they share on this stuff, and where they've taken Bernie Sanders' face and they've put it on Gandalf.
Oh, yeah,
really?
Fighting the Balrog, and the Balrog is Trump, and Bernie is Gandalf.
That's the excitement you're talking about, Paul.
And that's just this very weird thing, is people are willing to see this in mythic terms,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
People are willing to see, and the metaphor, for the Lord of the Rings was that you couldn't use the Ring of Power. Boromir, there's a great Boromir as Hillary, and Bernie is Frodo. And Boromir wanted to save Gondor by using the ring, by using the power. And the idea is like, no, it's just, you can't, and that's the big money financing. It's like the second you touch it, you're corrupted, you're evil, right? So there's this degree to which Bernie can tap into this sort of weird mythic idealism.
It's extraordinary.
And it's also, honestly, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's a little scary. You have to worry about what people what will happen when they find out. That's with the Arab Spring, when you find out, the good stuff isn't, right.
Jay, you know what I worry about? I worry about Bernie getting a cold. I worry about him not wearing a hat in cold weather.
Yeah.
Because he's 74 years old, and it makes me nervous.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
There was
You saw the footage. Did you see? There was another one I saw, which was a clip of Sanders just like running across an airport.
I saw that, yes.
And he comes out of this escalator.
Yeah.
And he's in like this escort. He's trying to and he's running. He's got no Secret Service. There's no protection. He's just, and it's like, out of my way, I gotta go save the country or whatever. The little phrase was just like, I got no time, I'm sorry, I have to go save the country. And flying coach around the country, and Larry Sanders' version, Larry David's version about the guy with the one pair of underpants that's drying on the thing. And some of these millionaires have 2, 3, 4 pairs of underwear. I got the one pair. I wash it out in the sink, and these,
It's endearing.
yeah, there's something
nothing plastic
there's
about
something
it.
genuine about it. There's something, and it's just it speaks to this sort of. And if we're afraid of oligarchy, if we're afraid of business as usual, if we're afraid of being sold down the river by the wealthy, which both the Tea Party right and the Occupy left, sort of agreed on in those camps. Like you get these people who are diametrically opposed in a lot of ways, but they agreed. There's this thing. The fix is in,
right?
And Bernie can sort of, the Bernie idea of Bernie can cut through that. And then when it gets down to particulars, you see, the difficulties, right? So there are people that are very angry about Obamacare because it's government takeover of healthcare, and it's like, well, they really don't like single payer either.
Nobody seems to mind the fact that the Republicans wrote it into the bill that the government can't negotiate prices with the drug companies.
Nobody seems to matter about that?
Wow. Well, it was this very weird kind of blindness, right, where Walmart acts as a giant vendor to brutalize people to get a low price for the consumer. Good. Government beats up Big Pharma to get a low price for the consumer. Bad. And it's like, well, why is it? It's low price for the consumer. Why is that bad? I mean, it's for me. It's like, well, that there's a black guy as the president when there are people on the television explaining to you why low gas prices are a bad thing. Okay, when you got a bunch of white people up there explaining like, it's not all good that incredibly cheap gasoline, which is putting money in the pockets of every American. That's really not all good. It's a sign.
Not if everybody's stock market portfolio goes down.
Yeah, for a certain segment of the investing class, it's a little upsetting,
Right.
And the same thing with healthcare too. Of course, there are people that make money on that investment layer in big pharma, and they like that money, and of course that's just money that's being taken out of the pockets of sick people, and the idea that like, well, maybe we'll leave some of that money in the pockets of the sick people so they can, I don't know, have houses and stuff too, and it's just like, oh no, the wealth will be destroyed if the sick people have enough money to pay for their houses. We live in a country where there's 10 times the number of empty houses than there are homeless people.
Right.
And somehow...
And everybody finds that normal.
And somehow this is a really functioning, this is a kick-ass economy we have here. And things are working well. You don't want to tinker with this system, man. It's firing on all cylinders.
So the one thing I saw that really cracked me up, going back to worrying about him getting a chill or cold. Yeah. There was they have this dog called Triumph. It's a puppet, a dog puppet. Have you seen it?
Yeah,
with a cigar in his mouth.
Yeah.
And the guy is hilarious. The guy who animates the dog. Anyway, they had him down in one of the primary states, and there was this deficit clock showing you how the United States deficit was increasing, and then the numbers were just flashing wildly. Mm-hmm. And Triumph said, "This is the number of times that Bernie Sanders goes out to pee at night."
Oh, the old. He's just not just another old white guy. He is the old white guy.
Yeah, and it's fun to make fun of too. He's so real. You don't have to worry about his somehow harming his
self-image. He's not going to hire an image consultant to determine what the hairstyle's going to be. I mean, just the hair alone, right? The idea that Bernie doesn't have time. I had a friend who worked for Progressive Democrats of America, and they were instrumental in sort of influencing Sanders in his decision to run as a Democrat, right? Because it was not clear to him originally that he would be embraced by the Democratic Party. Yeah. And so Progressive Democrats of America were amongst the people that were part of like trying to help him make this decision. And they didn't know what he was going to say. And he came to this meeting. My friend Mike was there. And he said, "Oh, my God, he's running for president." They were like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, "He's combed his hair." And he knew at that point, that Sanders this is on. We're going to do this thing. The man has combed his hair.
That's great.
It's
that was the updated version.
The one we've got on the screen now, 4 millions.
Right.
That's the updated version for the number of donors?
Yeah,
Individual
the previous one
donors,
was Bernie's
small
2.5 million.
2.5 to 4.
Right. So this was the latest one. The copy is pretty much the same except for the headline.
I read that he's got 71 million, and I think Clinton has 174 or something like that. Million in their campaign. But I don't see that as the primary deciding factor. It's the energy that he seems to generate.
Yeah.
It's the idea, the creativity that is unleashed in every individual. How can I help this person get elected president? Because I know that
Trump hasn't spent anything. I mean, he spent hardly anything. He's bought some TV spots, but he hasn't had to because the energy has been so strong for him and the media. I was down in Trinidad in August, and CNN was on in this house that I was staying, and it was all Trump all day.
Yeah.
It was just Trump, 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 and the amount of publicity you got was millions and millions of dollars worth of publicity.
Yeah.
CNN all day. So
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done analyses on campaign, sort of the relative size of campaign war chests and sort of the influence on election outcomes. And it is not true that just having enough money wins an election.
That's true.
You need to have a certain amount to play the game.
you think so, Jeff?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not true that but you need to be able to play the game. You need to be in there. You can't do it with nothing. But 4 million contributors, you're in the game. And so Bernie's in the game, and the game's changing because he's in it. And who knows how far he goes. Because I was part of the people that was excited about the Howard Dean candidacy, and prior to the Dean scream and the end of the candidacy, which I have a certain memory of, and other people from that time period have different memories of. There was a story that went around after the Dean scream that he had been talking about regulating the media in a serious way, about the fairness doctrine, and that shortly thereafter there was this little clip of him saying "yeehaw" that was repeated over and over and over and over again until Howard Dean couldn't be president anymore because he said "yeehaw," and it was this weird thing because because there's footage of George Bush at that time like giving the finger to the camera and saying terrible things. And I'm like, why don't we just repeat that over and over again? And it was just so I've had this fear that there'd be this Bernie moment, right? That Bernie would be confused and that he would say something and that they're going to repeat it over and over again. So I've been sensitized looking for the Dean scream again, and so far it hasn't really happened. So I think they've been trying to kill him with neglect and with sort of averting their eyes rather than finding a moment where his fly's unzipped and just like zooming in on it and going like, oh my God, his fly's unzipped.
That's very interesting, Jay. That whole Dean thing is something that I never quite understood.
Yeah, it was.
Why did that suddenly disqualify him and lose all that support? He was a rocket. He was going up.
I know.
And all of a sudden he exploded.
And there's I've heard more traditional non-conspiracy based explanations for the Dean campaign's implosion. But what we do know is that Joe Trippi and the people behind his campaign went on to build the social media machine that elected Obama. So it was like the technology that was pioneered there. And again, it was about opposition to the Iraq War that the party was not really speaking to in any way, and Dean gave it voice, and suddenly money poured out of nowhere on him, and it made him a voice and created a whole little weird, Democracy for America, DFA. There was this whole weird little moment there, and now, of course, Dean is well in the establishment, and he's pushing for Hillary.
He's pushing for Hillary.
And we see...
We forgive you.
Yeah, we loved you, Howard, and now we understand that, just blink in Morse code if we... well, this is the thing, that the split now is so great that you have Robert Reich and Paul Krugman, our two liberal economists, who are one's Hillary and one's Bernie. So there's this weird thing where there's this the division between what is impossible idealism and what is pragmatism. There's this crack that's running through the party, and we have to heal it at the end of all this somehow, because the alternative is absolutely, as Chomsky said, the alternative is carpet bombing civilians. It's ignoring climate change and just saying it's God's will. And, so the alternative is awe-inspiringly horrible. And so we have to somehow, even as we have this conversation, not lose sight of the fact that that another GOP presidency would be catastrophic for the planet.
Right. Oh, geez, I just lost it. It was just in my head, and I just lost it.
We're talking about global warming, which is something that the Republicans absolutely deny. They don't speak about it. They don't believe in it. They have no intention whatsoever of wrecking the economy. As they put it, wrecking the economy for any reason whatsoever. If this is not addressed, the planet is doomed. It's the question that we have now between electing someone who is named Donald Trump, who is off the wall, wild in his gyrations of his accusations of what he can say, and perhaps caught up so much in himself, but has has energized the base that if he is elected, I cannot see any question whatsoever that global warming will not be addressed for 8 years, perhaps.
Oh, I don't know that I agree with you. I don't think Trump is that. I don't think Trump is bought. So if you're not bought, then you've got to look around and say, what the hell are we doing? I mean, there's absolutely no reason for him to deny global warming. He doesn't have to do it to appease any of the party leaders because he doesn't give a shit. Excuse me, pardon that. He doesn't care what he says to them. So I'm not saying we should vote for Trump, but I think Trump is probably the best hope the planet has on the Republican side.
On the Republican side.
Right.
Yeah, well, there's definitely this weird thing where you're presented with these choices, and there's been a lot of debunking of the idea that Keish is a moderate, that they don't have any moderates. Olympia Snowe left the party a while ago, and that she turned the lights out when she left. Apparently, there's no there anymore. The Republican Party isn't a party; it's like a rhetorical position. Global warming is a huge issue, and
we went from the position, Paul goes from the position, I believe, correct me on this, Paul, that there's no reason for Donald Trump to deny climate change, and there would be no reason, should he be elected President of the United States, why he could not support a change so that the United States then embraces the concept of the threat to the planet and then changes the entire economic.
But if he wins and it's just the same old faces in the Republican Party come back into the Senate and the House, nothing's going to change.
That's the problem, right? Is that like the people that would come in with Trump would make it impossible for Trump's centrist impulses or his previous positions to ever be turned into policy, right? So really, the worst thing about Trump you can say about him is that he's on the GOP ticket. It's like if you look at some of the things he said, he's again, like you look at Social Security, his statements on Social Security, it's not that bad.
No, he wants to expand it.
Yeah, and there's a dozen ways in which Trump is the moderate centrist Democratic candidate.
Can we believe this person? Here's a question I'm asking. If you look at his history...
I'm not going to believe him.
No.
Well, the trouble is that he's literally, if we elect a reality television, star, would just forget about it. Just might as well watch The Walking Dead. That'll be the future.
We voted in Reagan, even though he had worked as governor of California, so he had something.
He had something, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I just say, in case anybody wants to see these ads, just go to paulstonesthrow.com. paulstonesthrow.com.
Yeah, paulstonesthrow.com
is my website, paulstevensstone.com. So that's all. I just want to get a little plug in there.
That's great.
Go check the ads out.
It's important.
Yeah, as I said, you can see those ads at paulstonesthrow.com. Okay.
It's a terrific ad campaign.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, no, they're very good ads.
Thank you.
Have we got this one? I don't think we've had.
No, we haven't talked about this one. This one talks about all the weirdness that the Republicans bring to the table, and the fact that you're not going to get somebody going in there who's half committed to changing things and make any difference whatsoever. You need somebody that can tame wild elephants. So simple as that. It's time for everyone to get burned.
I found this was one of your
Well, the fire was too big last time. It was threatening, so you felt almost like getting burned wasn't a good thing. This is relatively innocuous. You can put it out quickly if you need to. But this is just saying that it's, once the message is out there, and once people really understand what's at stake, if they ever do, I think it's going to be impossible not to hold them back. It'll be impossible to hold them back.
And you speak from energy there, how the energy expands quickly.
Yes. I mean, and it's amazing, his personal energy at 74. I was watching him, he was waiting for one of the primaries to be decided, and he was just taking basketball shots. You seen that?
Oh yeah.
He was making basket after basket.
There was a nice piece I read about him visiting the Bland family. The woman who was murdered, African-American woman that died in police custody. It was a really nice little piece, and the point of the article was that he had not exploited it for political gain, that he'd had this sort of chance encounter with his family, and he ended up, and they spoke with him, and their experience of the man, you could tell that they were just moved. I think they felt like he was listening to them. And then the fact that he didn't bring his photographers, he didn't bring his, he didn't exploit it.
Right.
And he didn't, so there's this thing where and then the person that had been at the meeting finally did, put this picture up that they took. So the meeting happened, and the person was there, and she reported on it. And this is the kind of thing that makes and breaks campaigns. These weird little unscripted moments that so we all remember Bush not knowing what a grocery store scanner was. We all know Romney's maker and taker speech, where he dismissed more than half the country as being a bunch of moochers. And there's all these moments in a campaign, and you could just see the opportunities for these moments on the Bernie side, for these sort of viral, beautiful moments that could really do something.
Did you see the one where he was, I think it was February 4th, he was giving a press conference, about to start a press conference, and a fellow on stage fainted?
That's right.
And his whole reaction was instantaneous. Oh my God.
Yeah,
and he ran over to see if he could help the guy.
Yeah.
And he stayed there until he was comfortable that somebody was taking charge of getting this guy dealt with.
He's a mensch.
And these
He's a mensch.
stories,
That's one of my
these
ads.
stories have,
Yes.
stories have they have inertia,
going, this
right?
is it.
The story gathers force. It has inertia, and for
It'll be in the headlines.
rightly or wrongly, we have the story about Hillary, of her just being stiff and awkward, and sort of stiff and awkward and defensive. And we saw this with Gore, and Hillary just reminds me of Gore. And God help us, if Gore had been allowed to be president, the world would be in a much better place.
Well,
than what, anyone who denies that is just lying. But there was this little core of unlikability. There was this little core of element of scolding. There was this thing where during the debate, they cut to him. Bush was saying some ridiculous thing, and they cut to Gore looking like this, like. And it was just like the teacher that's that thinks you're stupid, and there was this element to it
Resonated everywhere, right?
that people just hated the guy,
Right.
Anti-intellectual.
they didn't want to invite him to the barbecue, right. and so Gore fails the barbecue test, Dukakis fails the barbecue test, Kerry fails the barbecue test, right, and Bernie. He's like at the barbecue, right? Hillary, she's at the barbecue, but she's not really there. Like she gets, barbecue sauce on herself, and then there's like someone descends on her and puts a new coat on her or something. But Bernie's there. He's got sauce in his pants. He doesn't care, I think we could win, And I think there's this element where I feel like the traditional logic of pragmatism versus idealism is just inverted, where I feel like the idealistic candidate is the pragmatic candidate, just because we've so debased the political dialogue in this country that there's this weird kind of popularity contest thing that we're doing,
right.
And it's like, I think Bernie wins the popularity contest, and it was just like, McCain, got Palin, he was not super appealing, McCain was sort of, I don't know, stiff, and he fought in the war, and he had that army he couldn't lift. It wasn't his fault, but there was a degree to which, you looked at Obama and you looked at McCain, and you're like, I want to be friends with him. Even racists were